it won't, you know, yes, World Peace Wetland Prairie is so named because Nick Bennett, founder of the Omni Center for Peace, Justice, and Ecology in Fayetteville, had been trying for a long time to get just little stick peace poles in the city park. And he got to talking about finding a place we could do that. So by putting up 1/5 of the purchase price, $25,000 of the $125 that we paid for the land, he got to name it. Nobody else had asked for that. Tyson Food Company, Audubon, Arkansas. The city put up $50,000. That was from the land was won from the city, for the city, by the League of Women Voters and Sierra Club back more than a decade ago now, to protect trees. So that they wanted to set aside some money, more than $500,000 when the lawsuit was over, that the city had to set aside to buy green space, protect trees and other green space in the city. So the last $50,000 of that $500,000 or so went to buy this, and then, as I say, Omni Center, Tyson Food, and Audubon, Arkansas. 3 of them. Did I get 3 of them? Anyway, this was a nice coalition. You had a corporate sponsor. You had various environmental action type groups participating. And he got the name. And I made it prairie. But the fact is that it's the flow area of a larger neighborhood that was all prairie. All the houses in that neighborhood are built on black rich soil, flat. It's a half a mile to the new Highville High School. You know where that is? Well, it's where the old one, adjacent to the old one, it's what was Bates School back in the day. And it's a half a mile to the baseball stadium of the Razorbacks, half a mile from the, 3/4 of a mile to the football stadium. What I'm saying is it's right in the middle of town. It had never been developed because it was all wetland. And as the developers came in, then we had to fight, and the man who had it approved for 48 apartments to go on 2.5 acres agreed to sell it just a little more than he had paid for the land to cover his engineering cost. And his legal fight with me over having a 12-foot barrier between my property and the fence of his apartments. That was going to be the wildlife park. And we were going to do something that was done over here south of, north of Siloam Springs. And I can't even tell you the direction. I'm so trying to Anyway, they actually were widening the highway over there, and they came along with these giant machines and rolled up the turf. But the turf was all native vegetation that they wanted to preserve. They took it and rolled it out on an old pasture that you didn't know whether the native plants would come back or not if you just left it alone. But it was going to be part of one of our state preserves. Sure enough, all those plants came up when spring came. Natives are all late bloomers, 99% of them out on the prairie at least. And so we find a lot more up here in the hills, natives in the winter, or springtime. But anyhow, guess what? The natives came back alongside the road where they were going to widen it before they could get around paving, red dirting and paving. So it just shows how hardy, how persistent native plants are, particularly the prairie plants that have deep, deep roots. So anyhow, this has now been, we have an agreement with the Pinnacle Food Company, which has land adjacent to this. And I was able to get the mayor to go out with me and other members of the Environmental Action Committee and give that corporation a thank you certificate for not mowing it. The key to getting native plants on prairie land particularly is don't do anything to it except in the winter. If you want to mow it all down in the winter, you'll hurt very few things. But if you do it anytime between April and December, you are going to stop the growth of the things you really want to see. And a lot of things that I've emphasized up here, there's a milkweed seed pod and or some of the late blooming things. And you may have noticed most recently did you have a lot of little real woody asters, tiny late blooming asters? And did you go watch and see how many native pollinators, in addition to honeybees, were on them? Butterflies and all kinds of native bees that are solitary bees. They don't hive. You know, I'm sure you know that the honeybees are foreign invaders, just like the China honeysuckle and Japanese honeysuckle things we've got out here. But and fescue grass, it shouldn't be here. But anyway, or a bunch of others. Most of the things they want to sell you and put in your lawn are non-natives. They don't feed any insects. Therefore, birds don't get much sustenance from them. Birds have to have the insects. It's particularly important in the spring, but a lot of birds reproduce all during the summer and into the fall. We've got young cardinals that are just now looking like their parents in my neighborhood right now. They're real late. So the birds re-nest over and over. So they have to have protein for the young. The young can't get by on seeds. You don't see them taking seed pods a little bit. But so the important thing is that well, what are some of the things that we advocate, we saying nuts like me, besides not mowing during the growing season, in the place that you want to do that. Don't get rid of your leaves. Leave them on the land. Sure, you can chop them up and they'll become fertilizer center. But if you read one book that a lot of you may already have, because the author's been fed, well, 3 times I think, thanks to Cindy Cope, who's in charge of America in Bloom for Fayetteville, Bringing Nature Home. This is an entomologist from Maryland, Delaware. Anyway, he's written this book that everybody can read. Now, I can't necessarily pronounce some of the scientific names very well, and I can't memorize them. I can't memorize anything in my old age because I'm still trying to forget all the stuff I know. But anyhow, he'll tell you there are several hundred species of a certain kind of insect north of Mexico. Now, you may have seen one that you could identify, one particular kind of beetle, one particular kind of other thing. But he has a wonderful list back here. And by the way, these are only $17.95, and I don't sell them, but I buy them and give them away sometimes, trying to get neighbors to certify their yard.
Who's the author?
His Doug Talamy, Douglas W. Talamy.
Copy of the public library.
Oh, good. Well, I hope they have a run on it tomorrow. The key thing, though, is the list of host plants. What kind of butterfly uses passion flower? Anybody know? Or has to have it for its caterpillars?
Swallowtail. We've had other speakers tell us
Okay.
this, but of course we don't remember unless we look at our list.
I don't remember unless I looked recently, probably. Every year I photograph some of the same things and have to look them up, ask my wife, what is the name of that? But it's the question mark and the comma. Are you familiar with those? They're orange. I was hoping there'd be one behind me.
There was one up there just a few minutes ago.
Okay. But anyhow, that's the host plant. So around the edge of your property, if you want that kind of butterfly to reproduce there, and not just fit on one flying by checking your garden flowers, then you want to have that plant. Horse nettle, you know what that is? Little bitty yellow things. People don't like them much. Okay. It's important for several species that have to eat it. And all the native grass have species. A lot of the little skippers, they look like a little moth and act like something that's between a moth and a butterfly. Nobody's ever made a perfect statement about it. But anyhow, a lot of those grow on native tall grass. So if you got just some nearby, maybe some will come to your yard, find your whatever flowers you've got to nectar on. But they've got to have these host plants. So every gardener can benefit from having a copy of this kind of thing. The hickory hair streak. Oh, guess which tree? Whose foliage the hickory hair streak has to have?
Hickory.
Yes, ma'am. I'm glad it's right. The red-banded hair streak is pretty lucky. Several kinds of oak trees provide foliage for it. Sumac, certain species, staghorn, wax myrtle, winged sumac. Those are things that provide that one. In this group, there he was. I call it olive hair streak. There's some other names. You know what they depend on? Whose foliage they eat. You probably don't see them very far from a cedar tree. So things in the cedar family. In this
Got a lot of
case,
food here.
Pardon?
Got a lot of food for them here.
That's right. And see, that's the thing about this. I'm glad I can't see that place that they cleared, that massive place back this way, I guess, upstream. Right now from here, it's amazing. I used to fish bass tournaments on this lake for years and saw it from down there, but never up from here, this particular But because, nothing lives. Nothing lives in this grassy lawn out here, basically. The robins will find some earthworms when it's wet and they pick through it, but they don't. You have some different ones? And
Yeah.
Okay.
Number we don't.
Yeah. Good. All right. Thank you. A monoculture of non-native grass won't provide for any insect. Now, why do we care about the insects? Bird food. Joe Neal's going to be here, what, spring or
February.
February? And he'll be talking about bird food a little bit too. So, in fact, I was putting together some slideshows. I'm not sure this one's going to work, but I'm sorry. But I saw his name. I was going to put a lot of birds on the slides, and I don't have great bird photos mostly, and even when I do, I can't identify all the kinds of sparrows. Joe Neal can look at sparrows, he can listen to them, singing out there and tell you what birds are around. I don't have that kind of knowledge. I wish I did. I spent my youth hunting and fishing, which made me care about the environment, but I didn't learn as many species as, okay, there you go. Anybody want to identify those, please? But I do select photos with insects on them. Just call out the name if you. Okay, that's an assassin bug. He's really tiny. He's about so big, and on some flowers and some leaves, you won't even notice it's an insect. I can only see its legs and so forth when it's blown up on the computer screen. But this is a mountainside Ozark type of spring blooming milkweed that you just saw. That one right there was Asclepias viridis, and this is another kind of little grasshopper. That's a tiny grasshopper.
Monarda.
Monarda, thank you. Fistulosa.
Millar difficulosa, it grows on our hillside.
And this is a little insect that is type of beetle that uses a milkweed plant. That's the early cicadas from springtime. Were they 13 year or 17 year this year? It came out late spring. Who knows what that is?
Hummingbird moth, yeah.
Yeah, that's common milkweed, Asclepias syriaca, and it's not all that common where I live.
Mhm.
There's not that much here, but up in Rye, New York, along the coast up there, on Long Island Sound, my wife was up there and got pictures of just endless common milkweed plus other species in the nature area. And that's a female monarch. Anybody know how to tell? She's on.
Fireweed.
Okay.
Fireweed.
Uh,
I mean, fire pink.
Thank you. And this is another type of predatory bug. See, he's caught a
What's that robber fly?
robber fly.
Yeah, he attacked my hummingbird one time.
Hummingbird?
Yes, and I got pictures, and my son had to reach down there and grab it because it forced it to our deck. And my son grabbed it and took it off with a hummingbird. It was a freak thing.
Well, you may have seen it close. Now, that is the pod of the climbing milkweed. Also, this year I've had caterpillars on those. These are some of the late asters. And what's that?
Jewelweed.
And what's it good for, supposedly?
Poison ivy, antidote.
Thank you. This is one of my neighbor's front yard.
It's in a wetland.
That's right. And you know what kind of honeysuckle that is? It's called trumpet honeysuckle. It's the native. Here's another milkweed species. These go fast. And
Azuratum.
mist flower, azuratum.
Azuratum, isn't it?
Azuratum. Okay. And there's a variety of tiny flower flies. What do you call that cactus?
Prickly pear.
Thank you, prickly pear. How about this guy?
Petunia. It's a wild petunia.
Yeah. Can you tell the difference in a wild hairy petunia and a wild, not hairy?
Sensitive briar.
Okay. This is good. This is my front porch, showing a variety of birds. It's not very good screen.
That's that fire pink
fire
again.
pink. So that's primarily woodland.
That's a grass.
Anybody?
I don't know, some kind of grass.
Okay, that's a native tall grass in bloom.
And those seeds are edible, you can use them for flour.
So many of them, they're either related to
Yeah.
wheat or corn. That's my neighbor, when the street was flooded by his house, so you couldn't go across. It's a baby. That's how I got right in his face. See, you saw the plant he'd eaten to pieces. That's that same crossing there in front of my house. That's downstream from the university. Every time when you donate money to let them build another building, ask them to put a holding pond for their water where they pay.
Was that last spring?
That one was probably in the spring. This is another picture of climbing milkweed, and that's not a robber fly though. But yeah, the spring floods are pretty bad. Anybody know what this one is?
Oops.
Uh-oh. Anyway, there's your Lonicera sempervirens, the native honeysuckle. And that's a milkweed plant with what kind of caterpillar? Yes. And that's not a native, I'm afraid. But you got to have those. There's your robber fly up close. And that's,
Very aggressive.
That's a showy primrose.
thank you, showy eating primrose, and you'll have yellow ones over here before long. Cinquefoil, thank you. And
Larkspur.
larkspur.
Delphinium. It's a delphinium or larkspur. I don't know. It's the native one we
I wish
have.
I could give prizes. But a lot of these I'm showing, okay, what's that one?
I don't have that
Anybody?
footage.
Okay. I won't attempt, I may have it, when you go on my Flickr site, you may see the names are actually under these pictures. I can't remember year to year or month to month. There's another shot of a little tiny assassin brother. But that flooding comes off the university campus, the high school campus, and guess what? They're putting a new apartment complex north of upstream there between our house and there about 2 years ago it was built. Okay, there's your
Form these milkweed.
quadrifolia.
What's that in Latin?
And
What's
that's
that?
Asclepias viridis. And this one, I'm still not sure. It's one of the summer later bloom. So we just about got that back. But anyway, all these plants are host plants for some of the insects that are using them. But other insects use them for nectar and so forth. And they don't even care if it's a non-native for nectar. A monarch will go to lots of flowers that you buy seed down at the Walmart and scatter and don't care what comes up. But the milkweed is certainly an at-risk plant, but because of all the clearing, so much of it is on prairie land, the open land that
Rosemary.
Diodia, the white one was.
You look like rosemary.
Little tiny, those are so big. And I once got in trouble with people online when I went to a site that I was searching for Diodia to read more about them. And the 2 colors and slightly different down here. But anyhow, the people on that site were in New England, and they consider Diodia a hideous, invasive species that ruins their lawns. Well, only places I see it growing, you have to look down and get it. That is the, he's on my leg, the hackberry emperor butterfly, one of the many species that use the hackberry trees. And, anyway, they got angry when I said, well, it's a native plant, you should harbor it. And I'd rather have that than the fescue or crabgrass or whatever you're growing in that lawn, and it never takes over down here. Well, in New England, it does. Mm-hmm. And so they went through all these various poisons they were using to try to cleanse their yards of this Diodia. Mm-hmm. And it's just a harmless little tiny flower, and you're lucky to find them. But it does make good ground cover if you had the place cleared off and you wanted to.
That's that rosemary looking plant.
Yeah, the four-petaled white one. They move so fast. Anyway, well, we've got another batch, but we want to talk about, what we're talking about right now has been what should inspire you to want to set aside part of your yard, or all of it, in my case, just about. We're pretty all into it. We're surrounded by one side in the back's the nature park. Mm-hmm. And then there's a new piece of parkland that's not doing anything because it had fill dirt on it before it was converted to donated as a park by the developers. So they were planning to build right next to our house. I've been through a lot of wars. I'm kind of damaged. I was a Coast Guardsman during the Vietnam era, but I never got over where the bad stuff was going on. But I'm a veteran of developer wars in Fayetteville because they just come in such a rush. And any place, I've got places listed on the city, so that's a berry. What is a berry land? Places on the city's 2030 plan, future plan, they keep updating. And one of the things is a enduring green network in the city. And that ties into this community wildlife project. And they put that in there several years ago. And one some of the places, 2 or 3 of the places that I put on the list to be considered. Part of that network was very important, are now up for development, and that's the scary part. So all I can do is work with the developers to show them what's critical there. We do have a weak riparian zone ordinance. I may have one pamphlet over there about it in Fayetteville now. It sets aside a barrier of vegetation. Well, everybody was worried who owned streamside property that it would, kill their use of the property. Well, no, everything's grandfathered in. If you've been mowing it down to the bank and over the side, which means it's going to erode, but you can keep doing it. But if you sell it and somebody's going to develop it, they'll have to follow the rules. And the rules are way weak compared to what most cities that do a good job of this are. Instead of 100 feet or so, the arbitrary barrier is 25 feet. If you leave all the native vegetation in, you remove non-native, but you're not supposed to mow that 25, and for the next 25, weaker rules. You can see some of the information over there, but that's not going to work unless the developers know ahead of time how critical certain areas are. So Cindy Cope and I went and caught caterpillars off milkweed plants on a place that's just a few weeks after we did that, here comes the signs up that and they show up at the planning commission. So I know the architect planning, and when I went to the planning commission, I tried to say nice things, but I know you're not going to stop this project, but please be as gentle as possible with this delicate wetland site, because they will red dirt it totally and then dig pits to hold water. And a pit dug out in the red dirt fill they've used isn't really going to allow the water to recharge, to soak through and recharge the groundwater. And all through this country, you've got karst geology. So, I promise. Would you change the slide?
Sure.
Do we have a third? How to provide food for wildlife. And this is all on the internet.